Mixed Media Music.
Okay, so today I'm going to be reviewing a piece I found on Reddit on our composer called A Misty Planet of Blue. The composer, at least their YouTube name is Jacky Liu. And I did reach out to Jacky Liu a couple times, and I didn't get a response. But, you know, I noticed that nobody commented on this piece on Reddit, which is kind of unusual, especially because it's a well-crafted little piece. So I'd like to give some of my thoughts. Normally, I dialogued a little bit with some of these composers that I've reviewed, and they have some sense of who I am, and I have some sense of who they are. I have no sense of who this person is, other than the channel doesn't have any other pieces on it. So I'll add the caveat about myself. Jacky, if you're listening, and I will post this on your piece in Reddit. But I am mostly, I have a classical background, but I also kind of got one foot in the classical world, one foot in the film world. So if it's going to color some of the things I say and some of the suggestions I make about layout. Okay. So pretty much all I know about this piece is what Jacky said on Reddit, which is that this is a piece dedicated to their friend who is going through a difficult time, which is a very sweet thing to do, writing a piece of music and something so lovely as this. Really nice. I hope that helps your friend a little bit, and that is supposed to evoke feelings of kind of mystery and coolness and that kind of stuff. Okay, so Irving, do you want to pull it up and play some of it?
Yeah. Do you want me to pull up the sheet music as well, or is just playing the audio okay?
Just playing the audio.
Okay. Here we go.
I don't know. We probably don't need to listen to all of it. Maybe like the first 2.5, 3 minutes, something like that.
Cool. All right. Playing now. Is that about a natural place to stop, more or less?
It's a little hard to tell because...
Oh, you can't hear.
But
it felt like a natural place to stop, at least.
Okay. Yeah. So if you are either watching live or in post-production, the way that this happens where it's live, it's always a little awkward because I can't hear live as Irving plays. I have to listen to it like on my phone, which is like live, the live stream, and that's delayed. So, okay. Just so I understand why that is a little awkward there. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you stopped it in a nice spot. Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and the piece kind of continues in that vein for about 5 minutes. So it's a nice short little piece, and I appreciate that. For that this is not like a 30-minute piece. I listen to a lot of music from Reddit, and not a lot of it stands out to me. And this kind of stood out to me for a lot of really good reasons. So you should just know that if you're listening to this eventually, I do not. I don't pick things that I do not really enjoy and that don't stand out to me in a lot of good ways. So yeah. So again, I don't really know anything about your background, but this is very well crafted. I would say, there are some things that would maybe make me guess that you're kind of in the beginning of your compositional career, which is totally fine. And I could be wrong about that, but my impression is that this is probably also, just given the fact that you don't have any other music on your channel, this is probably an early kind of career effort, put that in parentheses, air quotes. But yeah, I think it's really, if that's true, especially, it's very, very well done. So the first thing is, I really like music that is kind of aquatic themed, and this, to me, my impression is this is somewhat aquatic themed. Misty Planet of Blue. I'm thinking of actually if I just think of the title, I think of George Fenton and like his music for all these big nature documentaries like Blue Planet, Planet Earth, Frozen Planet. And the music also suggests that. Even if I didn't know the title, the music would also suggest that. So I have no idea whether you're even aware of George Fenton's music for Blue Planet and Planet Earth and Frozen Planet. Really interesting stuff. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But to me, if that's what you're going for, this kind of like natural scene, kind of aquatic in some sense, maybe, you did a phenomenal job of capturing that feeling and what your title. And that's a really hard thing to do. Titling, I don't know whether you titled the work after you wrote this, or you came up with the title and then came out with the piece. Either way, a lot of times descriptive titles, in my opinion, don't always match that well with what is actually written, even if what is written is fantastic. But they fit together really well. I put in my notes, I think George Fenton would be proud. So he's the composer for a lot of film things, but in particular, I'm thinking of Blue Planet, Planet Earth, and Frozen Planet. Okay, some stuff I really enjoy. I love the melodies, and I like the harmony. It's kind of non-functional harmony. You're just kind of playing with different kind of chord sonorities, not like, I'm going 1-5-1, standard progression. But the harmony works. I think it works very well with the atmosphere that you're creating, and the melody is crafted in such a way, generally, your melodic lines, that they fit in perfectly with your harmony. Generally, I think your choice of instruments is great. I love the harp. Now, harp is an instrument I like listening to. I will admit I am not an expert on the harp and how to write for the harp. If I want you to come up with anything for a harp, I'm going to ask a harp player what is and is not possible and what is natural, because I just don't have much of a sense of that. So there are some things in here that, to my eye at least, the harp part, look really hard. And I could be totally wrong. I need to I admit I do not know enough about the harp. I would ask a harp player first whether they can play that, or whether you might just be better off having two harps. So I'll leave that caveat there. But what you have with the harp, like the sound, however it takes to replicate that in real life, whether it's two harps or one player, I think it's really beautiful. Piano also could have been another choice, or you could do piano and harp. I think Fenton, in this style of music, defaults to piano more often than harp, but I think either is a really great choice. And overall, your choice of instruments, I think, is it works pretty well. Yeah, so some things I would consider, changing or thinking about. Yeah, and again, this is just my opinion, so take it as you will. The first thing is, since I don't have a sense of you as a composer, Jacky, there's always a question of like what's the intent of this. Other than, yes, I know you said you dedicated it to your friend, but in a larger sense, are you like going for media music, like writing something for a film or a video game, or are you trying to write concert music? And that will determine a few things about how you lay things out. And if you watch any of these other episodes, these reviews I've done, I will always talk about that. So we're gonna get into some stuff about the layout, but keep in mind that like if there's slightly different standards for concert music and media music. And there's also just a question of like, is this something you would prefer? Are you just writing for your computer? Or are you kind of actually in the back of your head, like thinking about real musicians playing this? Because again, it does change things a little bit. If you're going to have real musicians play it, there's some other decisions you might want to make. So I'm going to assume here that ultimately most people want real people to play their music. So we're going to operate with that assumption. If you are thinking of media music, measure numbers. Every measure is the standard. It should be the standard in concert music as well. It's not, although it's always helpful if you do that. Yeah. The other thing is your score, at least on the video you put up on YouTube, is in concert pitch. So there's no transposition, which is the standard in film music and media music for their scores, for like the conductor scores, not for the parts, but the conductor scores. So that is the film standard. In the concert world, you want a transposing score. So you don't want everything like you have the horns, which are in F. You want them notated, a fifth higher than you do. So just keep that in mind, depending on what you're kind of thinking of when you write this, what your ultimate purpose is. Okay, so onto a couple things that apply no matter what your kind of musical world is. And a lot of this is going to have to do with like layout. You might say, well, these are kind of silly details thinking about layout and notation, but they're not really, especially if you want real people to play them. If you really don't want people to play it, then okay, it's not an issue. But one, you want your score to look professional to anybody who's going to see it. There's this, when things look really professional, it's easier to take them seriously. And also, if you have people reading them, real musicians, then there are things that are going to make it harder for them to read. So we want to get rid of some of those, make it easier for people to read them. Okay, so the big thing is like overall layout. We want to make sure that we group with brackets the families of instruments. So you have some kind of interesting bracket choices that don't really align with families. So you want woodwinds all bracketed together and separated, a little bit of space. Okay, and then you can within that have a subgrouping of related instruments. So like flute and piccolo, but you don't have piccolo, but you have a subgrouping of flute and oboe. I would group oboe and English horn together, that kind of thing. All right, so group families of instruments together, separate them, and then subgrouping of related instruments. It'll make it much clearer for a conductor reading it. And you can see lots of examples of how to do this properly in a book like Behind Bars. Okay, so you want to make sure that especially if it's in like a odd numbered meter, like 3, 4, it's a little bit different. But anything that's in an even number meter, like 4, 4, which is what we're in, you want to show the middle of the bar. Okay, so you want to make sure that if something is crossing over the middle of, in between, like beat 2 to 3, that we like we don't have notes that go over that. So like if kind of hard to illustrate, but there are a lot of places where you kind of just put like actual values instead of tying things together where it'd make a lot more sense if you're reading it. I know if I were to read some of this stuff, like sight read it in a recording session, I would have to like sit down and say, wait, where's the beat in some of these places? Okay. So we want to think about that. And again, you can like, there's great sources on the stuff like Behind Bars is a kind of standard book in all parts of the music industry for how to, like cleanly notate bars and, beats like that. Okay. I know that's kind of getting into some like nitty gritty details, but I think that'll make it much better if someone you want someone to play this kind of music one day. Okay. So a few other quick things. Generally your dynamics are mezzo piano and lower. Very little of it goes above a mezzo piano. And so two comments on that. Number one, that's not really what your audio sounds like to me. It sounds like it's a little bit louder than that, which could just be how you mix it, or maybe how it just came out of the box with whatever program you're using. So you might want to think about that. Do you want what the audio sounds like, or do you want what you wrote? And if you do want what you wrote, which is fine, but you want to keep in mind that it's going to be really hard for an entire orchestra to play very quietly the entire way through. Well, also make sure you indicate how many instruments are going to play a part. Like how many flutes do you have? How many horns do you have on horn one part, first horn part, and second horn part? I think that's important. Okay. I would also note that in real life, your percussion, like you have snare drum, bass drum, and gong, I think you note it as, especially the snare drum, is going to sound very different unless you note that you want some certain like particular effects with it. It's going to sound a little bit different in real life than it does with your sound font, whatever sound font you're using. So just keep that in mind. Oh, also you want to make sure that you pay really close attention, again, if this is ever going to, this or anything you write perform live, but you pay attention to the directions, because you have some places where you're like pizzicato and this, like, I don't know, maybe in the cello, it's pizzicato, arco, and then the next mark is arco. So the question is, did you go back to pizzicato at some point, or is that just an stray arco because we're already in arco? One other thing that stands out to me is generally you have it's kind of almost like 5-part chorale texture, and a lot of it with your strings. All the string parts, including the basses, kind of doing their own kind of chorale style writing. And that's not terribly common in the classical world. It's much more common in the contemporary film and video game world for producing kinds of different kinds of effects. Although normally you don't tend to see the bass being too independent of a cello, which it is for you. So yeah, depending on what kind of world and what kind of effect you want, that could be very, very effective. It's very effective in a lot of films. If you pretty much put on almost any film that is not like John Powell right now, even John Powell will do stuff like this. But put on almost any film or a lot of video game music, and you will find that kind of thing. Maybe a good example comes to the top of my head is John Williams. If you go to the soundtrack for Revenge of the Sith, go to the track Anakin's Betrayal. It's a good example of like what that kind of effect is going to sound like in real life. You might want to just listen to that and note that it's really hard. It's going to be a really thick texture, and it's going to be hard to keep it really, really soft. It'll be a little bit louder than I think you notated in some spots. Yeah. So that's the main thing. You could also choose, maybe add mutes to it if you think it's going to be a little bit too loud. So I would study some examples of that. And the Anakin's Betrayal is a good example, but there are pretty much any film or video game you turn on is going to have something like this. So just, think about whether that's something you want. Yeah. So I know there's a whole lot of stuff there, but I think, the notation stuff, if you want any music to be performed live one day, will really make it much easier for that to happen. Because this is really, really fantastic stuff. Your sense of harmony and melody kind of matching a harmony that isn't, traditional. That's really, really, kind of advanced stuff. It sounds really, really lovely to me. And again, you really did a fantastic job of capturing, the title in this sense of kind of nature and murkiness, but and light, different shades of that. Really awesome. If you are not familiar with George Fenton and the music for Blue Planet and Planet Earth and Frozen Planet, like I said, I think Fenton would be proud of what you wrote. I would just go listen to some of that. And actually, the scores for those 3 documentary series, the live in concert reduction to maybe, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hour long, best moments for each of them. The scores for those are actually online legally on issue.com, and I can put a link out later, but you can actually look at George Fenton's writing for these things. And he goes for a little bit kind of larger, grander texture. And so different kind of string writing. So it might be interesting just to see if you're interested in looking at that. But I think, and you probably are not at all thinking of George Fenton and Blue Planet when you're writing this. But I think it's really cool that you are kind of in that world anyway. And like I said, your title, I think of Fenton, and the music, I think of Fenton, even if I didn't know the title. So that's really awesome that you're writing him as, this kind of style, and you're doing it so well. So awesome job, Jacky Liu. Great piece.
Cool. That's some high praise. And I'll give my $2 opinion as is tradition. I thought it was pretty. That's about what I got. Cool. Hopefully, you said Jacky is the name?
Yeah, Jacky Liu is the name on the YouTube channel. So
I
assume that's the composer's name.
Hopefully, Jacky, you can check this out. And if you ever want to get interviewed in a later podcast episode at your convenience, can totally do that. We always like to pick people's brains and see where they're at. And it's just a fun thing to do. So hit us up if you're interested. And just let us know if you thought that doing this sort of thing is kind of cool.
Y'all think too small, I got big dreams. You just starting, I'm way ahead at the end scenes. Started reading and dodging all of the quick schemes. Money like your Spotify, boy, I got 10 streams. And I'm still looking for more. My people, they got a soar, I'm putting that on the Lord. Ain't accepting, ignore, just kicking down all the doors. Guarantee you, boy, if I ask for it, it's gotta be real big. I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids' kids. That's wealth years and years.